welcome to day 3 of Innovation Week, a week which aims to celebrate and raise awareness of R&D agri projects that Agri-EPI is supporting. The projects demonstrate the importance of collaboration across industry, science and academia to enable agri-tech innovation. So I'm Annabelle and I'll be your host for today's session. Before we get underway with the presentations, there are a few housekeeping rules. This is a live webinar and it will be recorded. Questions will be taken at the end of the presentation, but you can submit these as we go. We'll be online for 1 hour and 15 minutes. Please interact with us in the chat. Let us know where you're listening from and the company that you're representing. Innovation Week is supported by Leighton, whose team work in close partnership with thousands of businesses each year to maximise the financial benefit they receive from R&D tax credits, grants, and other innovation funding schemes. So in this session today, we'll be hearing from projects which aim to improve productivity, quality, and sustainability and welfare in livestock production. So I'm just going to move on to the next slide. So for those of you who don't know Agri-EPI Centre, Agri-EPI's goals are to enable technological and digital transformation in agriculture, and we cover all of the agricultural sectors. We aim to achieve industry targets in improving food security and environmental sustainability. And we work with a number of stakeholders, government, academics, tech developers, retailers, engineers, farmers, to enable agri-tech innovation through trial usage, assets, project management, technical advice, membership, and much more. So I am now pleased to hand over to Agri-EPI CEO Dave Ross, who will be providing an introduction to the session.
Thank you, Annabelle, and thanks to all delegates attending virtually today. The main topic of today is improving animal welfare and reducing variance at a producer level. I do hope you're informed more after the presentation of some of the exciting developments in this space. And I hope that you find each of the innovation days very helpful. This is number 3 of 5, and we have another 2 later this week. Moving back to the topic of today, welfare status is an increasingly important area for farm livestock. Animal welfare has moved up the agenda, especially in a post-Brexit world. The UK government, a few weeks ago, has launched what's called an action plan for animal welfare. There's a number of measures which are included in this action plan, including companion animals, but for farm livestock, I've pulled out the most relevant. So the 3 that I've picked out are the aspiration to improve welfare during transport, improving welfare of intensive farmed livestock, and also incentivizing farmers to improve animal welfare. Animals are also likely to be recognised as sentient in law, as a new animal sentience bill was presented to Parliament in mid-May, actually the House of Lords. The bill proposes what is termed an Animal Sentience Committee to report on all aspects. Now, this committee, in my view, will perform a function relating to the effect of government policy on the welfare of animals as sentient beings. The bill proposes at least all vertebrates within the definition, with a caveat that specific invertebrates could in future be included. In my view, these measures can combine to increase the policy driver intensity around animal welfare, both in maintaining and improving standards. The challenge this will, of course, include will be effective and objective monitoring of animal welfare in future. And I'm sure that agri-technologies, such as you will hear today, can play their part both in meeting the needs of policy and also the consumer expectations on livestock production systems and associated animal welfare standards. Moving on to the subject of variance in production, reducing variability can have a number of benefits. It can increase the percentage of achievement of target specification for any related livestock product. An example is given on the slide that shows the variability of finishing weights of cattle in a specific supply chain. The individual dots are actually farm averages, and you can see a wide variation there where the market is looking for somewhere near the middle. You can also increase revenue margins by being more efficient and consistent with the production process. And finally, it's generally a win-win with reducing greenhouse gas emissions, including reducing waste, and that can contribute to agriculture's important journey to net zero. How to reduce variance? Can agri-technologies play their part? What does it require? Well, I think it requires systems and analytics to inform on management practices and give both timely and what is called actionable insights, something that you can take action on, and gives you the information, reliable information to do so. And you may visualize this through some kind of dashboard type system. And I've given an example in the slide at the bottom, where there's a single animal's daily weight gain monitoring, which happens automatically. And that's presented to the farmer or livestock keeper over a timeline. And he can make his decisions on that information. Now, another aspect is something that's important that might unlock growth in this area is something called the proposed DEFRA Farm Investment Fund. That may, in future, be a route to including productivity innovations on UK farms. We'll hear today more about novel developments in both animal wearables technology, that is animal-mounted sensors integrating data, and also fixed sensor systems. All aspire to produce data and insights into animal health, welfare, and performance of lead productivity. I look forward to hearing more of the details, including both the challenges and the achievements from the speakers. So I'll hand back to Annabelle now to introduce our technical expert speakers, who will, I'm sure, illuminate more of their exciting developments.
Thank you very much from Dave there. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to our first live presentation and project to Jose Chitty, Chief Operating Officer at SmartBell. Jose will also be joined by Eamon Donnelly as well from Parkland Veterinary in his presentation. Jose is a mechanical engineer with experience in automation and development of performance and decision support systems. We can see your screen, Jose, over to you. Jose, you're on mute, sorry.
Okay, first technical issue of the evening. Can you hear me now? Perfect. So I'm here to talk to you about our SmartBell project. The SmartBell project is funded by Innovent UK, and we're working together with Parkland Veterinary Group, SRUC, and Agri-EPI. So to tell you a little bit about what the main issue is. So the project, when we started, there was some research done internal within the group, and we've looked at that the top 10% of farms had double the calf growth rates and a third of the antibiotic use of the bottom 10%. So as Dave was saying, there's a lot of variability in the industry. Now, when we started digging a little bit more into it, we realized that one of the top reasons for that variability was respiratory disease. And if we looked at what impact that had, so this is some information that Eamon from Parkland Vet Group provided for us. If you saw even animals that were in a pen where there was another sick animal, but they were never recorded as being sick themselves, had an extra 33 days required to finish. The ones that were moderately sick required an extra 44 days, and the ones that were severely sick required almost an extra 2 months. And in general, they recorded much lower daily weight gains. So there were a series of different pathogens that were the cause of the issues. But what we've been finding is that the behavioral pattern characteristics to be able to identify sick animals is the same. Now, there's a couple of images that I'll show here. Actually, now, even I can probably switch over to you right now.
Sorry about that. My internet's a wee bit unstable there.
No problem. I'll let you talk. You know, I'll far more about this than me, so I'll let you carry on.
Yeah. So the previous slides, you know, we just wanted to reinforce that there's obviously a lot of losses there, primarily caused by pneumonia. And my slide before that, you know, we showed that, you know, 37% of dead calves that are presented to our local investigation lab in Belfast, you know, actually died from pneumonia. So it dwarfs all other, you know, causes of pneumonia. Second, I think, was calf diarrhea, which wild calf picks up as well. And then the other slide, you know, demonstrated that actual subclinical pneumonia that's causing a lot of losses, economic losses in terms of taking longer to finish that animal to the factory, or loss of milk production in the first stage of lactation. Recent studies showed that an animal with one lung lesion at weaning produced 500 kilograms less in her first lactation. Also, those animals are taking longer to get to their first stage of calving. You know, ideally we're aiming for 22 to 24 months. Those animals with lesions are taking longer. Their milk production is lower over their life, and unfortunately they're culled earlier as well. So just move on to the next slide there, Jose, please. So yeah, they can see there's a whole plethora of different pathogens there that cause pneumonia. These are quite common. Some of them are primary pathogens, and then some of them take the advantage of damaged lungs and then cause the knockout blow to the calf. Now, a lot of these diseases can be vaccinated for, some of them can't be, but the problem is with the vaccine, as we know with COVID, there is that immunity gap. You take the vaccine today, but it takes, what, 2 to 2 months, depending on the vaccine, on the age of the animal, before we have full protection. And that's the issue that we see in those early calves, you know, that we're monitoring from 2 weeks till 3 months of age. If we can pick up the early disease with wild calf before the vaccine is actually working, then we can treat and isolate and stop the infection spreading within the group. So if you can move on there, Jose, please. So this is a typical lungs that we would see. You know, we would go out to a farm. Farmer reports he's maybe had a few deaths or one death. We often do a post-mortem on the farm, and I think it educates the farmer, you know, how badly damaged these lungs are, especially if it's a large farm. Maybe the workers, their background might always have been agriculture before. So we find post-mortems really demonstrate the problem of pneumonia. And you can see in these lungs here that the front lobe, the apical lobes there's a lot of hemorrhaging, a lot of fibrosis, you know, early stage fibrosis, a lot of inflammatory infiltrates, and you can imagine that's a very poor structure for air exchange. And we often take about an ice cube size lump off, pop it into a bucket of water, and it sinks like a stone. So you can appreciate that's a very poor structure for air exchange. You can see the more healthy lung beside it there, the lighter colored. I don't know, can you see my cursor there, can you? Or no, maybe not. Yeah, you can see the healthier lung beside it, and that's, you know, often infection starts in the front end of the lobes, and then it develops on into the more caudal lobes. You could move on to the next slide, Jose, please. And you can see this is unfortunately what happens when an animal develops a chronic type pneumonia. You can see the abscess there. There's going to be mucus, plus there's calcification from those sort of long-term infections, and it has this gritty, sandy feel to it. And you can appreciate that it's a very poor structure for air exchange. And you know, those animals that are taking longer to get to the factory, producing less milk, taking longer to even get into the milking parlor. There's lesions like this in the lung, maybe only 10% of the lung, but that is holding the animal back from its full genetic potential. So you can move, please, Jose. So with the advent of ultrasound here, it's something in the last couple of years, we're just using the normal ultrasound machine that we would use for pregnancy diagnosis. And if you look where the cursor is there on the right here, that is actually sorry, on the right, Jose, yeah, that's actually normal lung field there. Those are normal reverberation lines. But to the left, you can see there is a lung lesion there. So the big advantage is we can actually diagnose this. Normal auscultation will not pick that up with a stethoscope, but with an ultrasound, we can demonstrate that this animal had pneumonia at some stage in the previous number of weeks. And what we have discovered from that is that there's a subgroup population there with subclinical disease that were never treated, they were never seen, and those animals then are the ones that are making us more inefficient. And somebody had mentioned there, carbon footprint and the issues that are coming down the line there. So if we can sort of help prevent those chronic pneumonias, I think could be a big help in terms of driving efficiencies. This photograph is from a calf with chronic pneumonia. Obviously wasn't picked up early enough. Lungs went on to develop, just like I showed you in that slide with the abscesses. You can see this calf's pretty miserable looking. He's very thin. He's got an ear down, and that probably tells us that there's mycoplasma pneumonia in the background. This animal was euthanized because it was never going to be an efficient animal. It was never going to it was going to take far too much food to get it to the stage where it was ready for the factory. And unfortunately, we do see those, and the hope would be a well cow we can reduce the number that we see of those. So this here is a slide of recent studies that have been done to show that there's this subclinical pneumonia. Yes, the clinical, in red there are the animals that have been picked up by the farmer and being treated. So those are obviously sick, obviously the ones that are blowing, discharging nose, maybe not feeding. But there is this subgroup, and various studies put that between 20 and 60% that actually have subclinical pneumonia depending on the system. Recent study in Scotland there, 180 calves, ultrasound at weaning, and 17% of them were found to have lung lesions. Yet only 2% of them have treated. There was other studies done by Zoetis, and they looked at abattoir post-mortem studies after the animals had went to the factory, and 70% of those animals had showed lung lesions. So, what I find exciting about well calf, if we can pick those early subclinical infections up, isolate that animal, treat it quickly. And the beauty of that is if we can isolate, then that infection isn't spreading among the rest of the group. And because we're picking it up early, you have a greater chance of actually treating it successfully. Like all infections, if you treat them early, then you have a better chance of clearing them up. The other advantage is, we can actually measure the amount of subclinical infection at the minute. The only way we can measure that at the minute is with ultrasound, which is quite labor intensive and not everybody can do it. So if we can demonstrate to the farmer that he has a problem with subclinical pneumonia, then we can look at his whole farm structure holistically. We can look at his colostrum management, nutrition, his housing, his ventilation and drainage, and try and improve that. And then, if you can't measure something, how do you manage it? So we could use this as a monitoring tool, so we can see, if his calf rearing system is improving or it's deteriorating. And that's where I see the potential for this product.
Awesome, thank you, Eamon. So I'll tell you a little bit about what we're doing in the project. So we're effectively looking at the animal's potential, and then if we can monitor the environment, the nutrition, and the health, then that will give us a clear picture of what that animal needs in order to grow well, like Eamon was saying. So we've gone in the project through doing a series of interviews across multiple farms, and we mapped out the user journey, both from the farmer side, but also from the animal side. And we've tested, we ended up deciding to go for a ear monitoring tag and environmental monitoring. And we did a whole series of tests of different designs and prototypes and went through a range of testing at the Crichton facilities that Caroline will tell you some more about later. We went from doing 3D prints, and now we're kind of closer to the final prototype that we're going to be testing and quantifying results on farms. So kind of like what that allowed us to do is kind of arrive at something that was robust and durable. It was quite hard to make it withstand calves and stay on calves and make sure that it was weatherproof. And at the same time, long life and easy to set up. And one of the things that we put a lot of effort in is to make sure that it was comfortable on calves. And we tested a lot of different shapes and materials and assessed how it sat on the animal's ear. So the objective of that is then to, Caroline will tell you a little bit more about all the data that we're collecting across all those aspects. But if we can automatically collect as much data as possible so that the onus is not on the farm to be logging everything, then that allows us to do real-time analysis so that when you go and see an animal, immediately you have all the information of which ones are the candidates for disease, and it can allow your decisions to be more data-driven. So for example, you could say, if a drop of activity is above 30%, then you go in with methacam, and then if it continues on, then you could then start using antibiotics. Now, the thing is that it's not easy to spot. These are just 2 graphs from an animal under study, and this is just what we get raw from some of the sensors looking at the activity and the animal's temperature, and it's not very easy to spot. So what we've developed is a series of machine learning techniques that allow us to combine both behavioral traits, activity, temperature, and environmental traits into indexes. And then those indexes can be for an individual animal, for a group. You can even set indexes for farms. And then this is just an example of that same animal. And then it's a lot easier to then spot that when it crosses the threshold and the animal got assessed, and then it got treated first for scours, and then about a week later, it got treated for pneumonia. So the way we're delivering these alerts, effectively what the system does is it specializes in capturing different anomalies, and then it works together with the farmer to then assess what that anomaly is. So that can very well be picking up early disease of like pneumonia cases, but also other issues. So we've had cases where we've raised an alert and it was a pneumonia when the animal got assessed, but the animal wasn't eating and it was feeling poorly. So it also picks up other things, as well as just normal events that we're now mapping into whatever the farm procedures are. So we can see that there's a drop of activities and alterations in temperature during dehorning. So right now the system's probably as good as a stock person at detecting scours and better than a stocks person at detecting pneumonia. And the next thing that we're going to be doing is especially focusing on what Eamon was saying about detecting those subclinical symptoms and quantifying those gains over the long term. Over to you, Caroline.
Thanks very much, Jose. So for those that don't know me, my name's Caroline Duthie and I'm based in SRUC. I'm actually based at our Beef and Sheep Research Centre, but I work closely with colleagues in our Dairy Research Centre. So essentially what we've been doing in this project is helping Jose develop and validate his product by doing all of that ground truth data recording that he mentioned that's really important for developing an accurate system. So this is a picture of our Crichton farm facility. It's basically our Dairy Research and Innovation Centre down in the southwest of Scotland. I don't know, Jose, if you can point over the calf facility there. So essentially that's our 2 calf facilities. The first one that Jose circled is our key calf facility, where we have a lot of equipment in there to capture data that can help underpin these developments. But we've recently expanded that out into a bigger calf facility, and I'll talk about that in the next couple of slides. You can pop to the next one, please. So this is a a recent investment, I have to say, we've upgraded our calf facility a couple of years ago through investment with Agri-EPI Centre. And what that's allowed us to do is to install a whole range of biocontrol equipment. And that equipment, I mean, this is not what you would see in a commercial farm, but it's really important for us in the terms of research and to underpin the types of development that Josie's mentioned in the slides. So what we can do in this facility, we have lots of data capture systems, so we can automatically monitor animal behavior, we can monitor milk intake, automatic weight recording at the milk feeders, automatically monitor water intake, concentrate intake, and forage intake. So this is really important for us. So if we're developing a system that's relying on these behaviors or activities, we need to be able to monitor them in the research phase of the development. We can go to the next phase. The next slide, please. Yeah, so one of the things that we encountered through the project was that one of our concerns was that what we didn't want to do was develop a system that was very specific to Crichton, so very specific to that automatic calf feeding system, because that in itself is not representative of lots of commercial farms that are out there. So recently we've expanded our calf facility so that we have also got a bucket feeding system. And that's actually been quite timely for this project, because what that allows us to do is test and validate a system, the well calf system within all that important infrastructure for data recording, but also allows us to test it and refine it for a bucket feeding system as well, which is really important. We can pop to the next slide, please. So essentially what our involvement in this project really has been to support Jose. So initially, Jose showed you all of the different types of prototypes that was developed within the project and how we got to the final product. So we invested a lot of effort alongside our stockmen, our trained technicians, our animal behaviour and welfare experts, and our vet support to make sure that the system was really was focused on calf comfort, accurate data capture, as well as retention. So we spent a lot of effort monitoring these calves to make sure the prototype that we've developed within the project really is suitable for commercial use. If you want to pop to the next slide, please. And then what we've been doing for the past 18 months of this project really is building that ground truth data set that Jose needs to build his algorithms that says this calf really is suffering from disease or a subclinical issue. And one of the key things for us, and one of the difficult things to do on a commercial farm, really is to get access to really accurate health records or clinical assessments of individual calves every single day of its life or during that pre-weaning period. So what we've adopted within this project is the Wisconsin scoring system, which is one of the most commonly used, or I'd say the gold standard assessment of clinical disease in calves, specifically respiratory disease. So we've adopted this assessment within this project. So for every 150 calves that we're monitoring within this project, we'll have a clinical assessment of respiratory disease and scours every day of its life through the pre-weaning period. So that's an incredible effort from our technical team. If you want to pop to the next slide. So I think this might be my last slide actually, and this is just to show all the range of data that we're capturing within this project. So this is all really important when we come to developing this type of system. We need to make sure that we have an accurate data store and database that supports that development. So everything from basic animal information, the animal ID, its breed, its sex, health records alongside that assessment of clinical scores. We've also got productivity and performance records of every individual animal, all of that automated data recording that I've already mentioned, but also environmental data, because environmental information is also really important when we're looking at animal behaviour, and that is also affected by environment. And we've also got, and Eamon mentioned earlier on, the importance of ultrasound scanning. So we're ultrasound scanning every calf as well as an additional validation exercise to tell us whether that calf had been suffering from disease or not, alongside our clinical scores. So you can see this is a tremendous effort from a huge number of people at SRUC to build this data set, essentially to support Jose's development. I do believe that would be my last slide. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks, Caroline. Over back to you, Annabelle.
Thank you for that great joint presentation there. We've had some good feedback in the chat as well about Wellcroft project. So now we're going to hear more about the Optivis project with a joint presentation from Dr. Caroline Duthie, who currently leads SRUC's Beef and Sheep Research Centre, Diego Sprekelsen, Head of Delivery, Senior Veterinary Manager at Hallmark, and Andrew Loftus, Senior Advisor at Hectare Agri-Tech. So if you'd like to share your screen, over to you.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. My name is Diego Sprekelsen. I'm a senior veterinarian acting as the lead representative for the Optivis research and development project for improved beef production. The Optivis project is a new research and development project involving the beef industry, scientists, and precision engineering companies. The team aims to enhance returns for beef producers while helping processors become more efficient. The OPTI-BEEF is a collaborative partnership project. The lead partner is Hallmark Veterinary Compliance Services, the company I work for. About 2.5 years ago, Hallmark acquired from HDB, the UK's independent carcass classification business, the Meat and Livestock Commercial Services, people know as MLCSL. As you can see on the screen, Hallmark works with Innovent Technology Limited, Ritchie Limited, the National Physical Laboratory, Scot Beef, Harbro, Hectare Agri-Tech, Agri-EPI Center, and SRUC to deliver the project. So it's quite a large number of partners involved in this project. The project already started in May 2019, and it's a 3-year project. This 3-year project won funding of £1.2 million from the UK Research and Innovation through the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund as part of a package to support productive and sustainable crop and ruminant agricultural systems. We move to the slide, next slide. Our ambition is for the OPTI-BEEF project to drive improvements in the productivity, quality, and the sustainability of beef production by improving the accuracy of current methods of abattoir carcass grading. As you might be aware, the current established method for carcass grading is manual and relies entirely on human judgment. It is also our ambition to optimize slaughter selection. The on-farm element of the project is about ensuring that livestock are arriving at the abattoir at the optimum point, reducing the number of animals which don't, at the point of slaughter, meet processors' specifications. This will in turn optimize returns for producers by helping them be more selective on farm, leading to greater efficiencies through the processing facilities. The project will also target the ability to predict yield of primal cuts, something we believe the industry has wanted for a very long time. And it is also our ambition to create the first platform for integrating data from calf to carcass. We move to the slide number 3. Sorry, I'm not controlling the slides. And the aim of the OPTI-BEEF project is to develop a series of on-farm and in abattoir technologies, which we will link up to form an integrated calf to carcass system for monitoring individual animals. So in terms of the on-farm technologies will be developed for whole life monitoring of individual animals, including advanced 3D cameras, novel fast sensing, automatic weighing, and feeding tape recording. In terms of the abattoir, the Optivis systems will use new technology, including 3D imaging and fast sensing as well, to provide a more accurate and detailed measurement of the carcasses and the components. And then the integration of the data gathered on farm and in the abattoir will shed more light on the factors influencing carcass yield and drive improvements in product quality and consistency. Using this information, the farmers will in turn be able to make informed decisions to optimize nutrition, health, and animal welfare, as well as slaughter selections and genetic selections. I will pass you now with my colleague, Dr. Caroline from SRUC, and she will give you a brief overview of the technology. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Diego. And so I've got a slightly different hat on with this project. So this is very much focused on the beef sector. As Diego mentioned, there's a whole raft of different partners in this project across the supply chain, which is really important to this type of development. And what we're doing within the project is we're developing a series of technologies that can be used on farm that are aimed at the commercial farmer. So they're aimed to be commercially viable, and linking that with a set of technology that's being developed in the abattoir. And that the real advantage of that for me is ensuring that farmers have the data at the appropriate time to really drive that decision making on farm, but also providing a much more detailed feedback of the carcass value and the carcass development to that individual, about that individual animal to the farmer. So I very briefly put together a couple of slides that really just shows the type of technologies that we're developing within this project. So in this slide here, this is very much the on-farm technologies, and there's a series of different technologies here. The top three pictures are technologies that are being developed by our partner Ritchie, based in the northeast of Scotland. So they're very much focused on tools that can be utilised on farm to give us access to a range of information. And this is information that farmers have been asking us for. So the first thing here on the top left, and some of you might be familiar with the Beef Monitor platform already, but this is very simply an automatic live weight recording system that's linked with a water trough. So essentially, the animal accesses the Beef Monitor platform to access the water trough, but that's the motivation for the animal to use the platform. Automatically captures a live weight of that individual animal and links that to EID technology. And you can see the EID technology integrated in front of this platform. This seems like a very simple solution, but actually it's a really valuable one for your commercial farmer, because it takes away all that labor requirement of accessing that information and automatically sends that information to a database. And over time, we can capture lots of information about performance and productivity of that animal, which will inform on performance and productivity, but might also tell us about animal health. So in terms of value, that's a really useful tool. So what within this project, that's been upgraded to integrate additional EID technology within the platform. So along with low frequency tagging, we can also work alongside ultra high frequency tagging. That's really important when we move towards a system where EID tagging becomes compulsory for our beef farmers. They've also expanded their products to look at systems that can monitor individual animal feed intake on farm. So this is a very first prototype of electronic feed intake recorders, very much aimed at your commercial beef farmer. And that's currently undergoing test at our beef research facility just south of Edinburgh. And they've also focused on developing automatic water intake recorders as well. So you can see they're expanding their product services quite substantially within this project. One of the key values for me, though, really is in integrating the different technologies. So one of our other partners, Innovent Technologies, they have been working in the sort of 3D camera space for a long time in different sectors, and they've done a lot of work in the pig sector. What they're doing within this project is essentially expanding their expertise into the beef industry and integrating their 3D camera technology with the Ritchie technology. And this is a really nice collaboration. So essentially, every time an animal can access the water trough, not only are we getting information about feed and water intake and automatic live weight, we're now also getting automatic 3D image capture from that platform as well. And that allows us to infer some important features of that animal's development. So allows us to start to understand carcass value at the point on farm. Because at the moment, as Diego was saying, that sort of feedback to the farmer happens quite late and doesn't really allow individual farmers to optimize their slaughter selections, for example. So by integrating this technology on farm into automatic platforms, allowing us to start to understand carcass value on farm, allows farmers to make important decisions on farm at the right time to really drive those improvements in efficiency. This is where the key value for me is really beginning to integrate different types of technology from different areas of expertise to really drive improvements in the industry. And aligned with this, this moves me into the abattoir side of things. We've got two of our technology providers are working in the abattoir. And the first of this is Innovent technology. So essentially taking their imaging systems into the abattoir to allow us to start to understand at the point of grading a much more detailed breakdown of that carcass. So at the minute, we're very much focused on a conformation score or a fat score, but we really want to be driving towards yield, primal yields, but not necessarily just yields, primal dimensions. So the ambition of this project really is to start pushing the boundaries here and provide a much more detailed breakdown of the carcass at the point of grading. We're also working alongside the National Physics Laboratory, and this is just an image from the labs. They've been working with us to look at novel sensing systems, for example, to look at fat yield of the individual animal on farm, but also in the abattoir. So this is, for me, as an academic, a really nice collaboration, because within this project, we've got lots of different technology expertise and supply chain partners that are really driving towards the same ambition, which is very much focused on improvements in efficiency of the beef industry, which really helps us to drive down the carbon footprint. So I'm going to hand over to Andrew Loftus, and he is going to really focus on where the value in this is. The technology is really interesting, and we're all can get quite focused on the technology, but the real value for me really is in the data and the information that we present to the farmer.
Thanks, Carol Ann. So I'm Andrew Loftus. I'm a senior advisor to Hectare Agri-Tech. You may know them as Sell My Livestock. So they're a large online livestock trading platform operating mainly in the UK. And as well as that, in a different role, I'm also chairman of the Carcass Classification Scrutiny Committee, which acts to create, bolster trust in the deadweight supply chain amongst farmers and other people in that supply chain. And that really is around confidence in classification and the fair application of carcass classification throughout the UK, so that people know that it's consistent when they supply animals into one abattoir or another. So I guess the point to start with is just emphasize where we are now. I mean, Diego touched on this, that classification is in most abattoirs a manual process carried out by highly trained individuals, but they are, after all, human beings, and that comes with a degree of inconsistency when we are looking at natural products. So a lot of time is invested in standardizing between areas of the UK to make sure these human beings are able to, as fairly as they can, judge carcasses accurately according to the Europe grid, which was until very recently mandated by European law. And of course, we do have ability to depart from that in new and interesting ways now. And I think this project plays into that. So at the moment, let's say it's largely manual. There are some quite, I hesitate to use the word primitive, but quite old technologies now available as an alternative. But the idea of this project is to really move that technology forward so that we have a much more comprehensive picture of the carcass, not just as it is presented in the abattoir immediately after slaughter, but also while that animal is alive on farm. And not just at one snapshot while it is alive on farm, but a time series as that animal grows and develops. And obviously, when you have a time series of this sort of carcass information, and you can see the evolution of its weight and its shape over time, that data is far more reliable if you can see a time series and you can extract much more from it. So in front of it here, we just have some examples of the sorts of data we're extracting. The one on the top left is the beef monitor system, which is where Ritchie are compiling the results of the beef monitor on live animals in finishing units in Scotland. I think they're all in Scotland at the time being. So we can see weight gain, etc., and we can see that hopefully the evolution of their predicted carcass classification on the Europe grid at the moment. But as I say, this project does have ambitions to go beyond the Europe grid. QScan on the top right is the Innovent technology deployed on pig farms at the moment. So that's an example of its application into beef. And then some simple correlations down there on the left between different characteristics over time. And then we have used an example on the Sell My Livestock platform in the bottom right of that is a system out there which monitors livestock movements as a detection for general health attributes and heat. But it's one example of the way in which we can use this sort of technology, this sort of data capture, to add value to livestock at the point of sale, so that buyers can see these drivers of value, and the marketplace is provided with new information, and that by having that new information, buyers in that market can act on that and create value in the supply chain. So we'll have a time series over time of weight and a predicted Europe classification, and we hope to go beyond that. And this will drive improved slaughter selection. I think we've both already touched on that. And AHDB figures show that animals in the UK are consistently overfinished, and that is costing the finisher time in producing an extra product, fat, that the feed the animals are consuming to produce that fat is wasted, and then the fat is essentially a waste product in the abattoir. So it's creating an inefficiency there, and also has an impact on profitability and greenhouse gas emissions for the sector. But not just slaughter selection, as mentioned already, it's about live store cattle selection. So this is animals going from the farm of birth into a finishing unit. And the vast majority of cattle in the UK are traded that way. They don't spend their whole life on one farm. They are traded as adolescent beasts. And this should hopefully provide us with more data for store selection. And of course, when you have this level of store animal data attached to an ear tag number and this level of slaughter selection data, then you get the potential for genetic selection, and genetic evaluation creates a virtuous circle. So that even those units which perhaps do not necessarily have this kit employed on their farm, can also, the industry as a whole can reap benefit even on smaller farms because of that genetic progress. So if we can move on to the final slide, I think. So so it enables us to monitor those key aspects of performance. So let's just talk a little bit about, so we've talked about weight, we've talked about water intake, and we've talked about the Europe grid classification. Now, the Europe grid classification is a reasonable measure of the overall yield of saleable meat from a carcass. But it is quite crude by necessity, because it had to be administered by human beings visually looking at carcasses hanging in abattoirs. But if we are to move beyond that into this sort of technology, it opens up the possibility to measure all sorts of new attributes on that carcass. So fat sensing is a key one of those. So fat is potentially an area of waste, but also an area that could enhance meat eating quality, in the example of marbling. But it can also look at the yield of specific cuts of meat. So the UK market has historically been quite a good market for what we call the round cuts. So the rear end of the animal, the rump, sorry, not the rump steak, but the round, so the silver side and the top side. Now that market is declining, and yet our measures of the carcass have not kept pace perhaps with that decline in the market, whereas we are moving more towards an American style market where there's greater value in the loin and in mince. And this would enable us, through more sophisticated measurement and characterization of the carcass, to incentivize those areas where there is market demand, such as the loin being a very good example. And it's not just about a greater volume of loin muscle overall, it's about the shape of that loin muscle. In very crude terms, you'd want a longer loin rather than the fatter one, because that's more in terms of portion control and creating value in the supply chain. That's where you would want to achieve the progress. So a number of really valuable innovations there around meeting abattoir specifications and allowing those abattoir specifications to evolve with price incentives, finishing sooner, so reductions in unnecessary feed, bedding and labour cost. Health issues as part of this, because you are monitoring water intake, etc., and weight on a regular basis, and that's a very early indicator of something going wrong. So overall, there's a huge ability to optimize a supply chain in an area that has been perhaps underinvested and under-innovated for quite a number of years. I think, Caroline, is that the last slide?
Indeed, it is.
Indeed. So hopefully I've done the potential of this project justice there, and more than happy to take any questions if there is opportunity.
Thank you very, very much for that. So we're just going to finish off finally with going back to Jose Chitti for the Healthy Heifer project, and we'll be taking all the questions at the end, but please do submit them as we go. Thank you.
Hello, can you see my screen now? Did that work?
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Healthy Heifer project, and this is in comparison to WellCaf is a much smaller project, and the principle behind it was when we started WellCaf, we were focused on dairy bred beef, and that was our initial focus, and Healthy Heifer was taking that and thinking, okay, well, we know these are the gains that can happen in beef. We have the same problems in dairy farms. How can we apply the same process throughout the process of heifer rearing? So effectively, the theory was the same. So the animal has a base genetic potential, and then if we monitor the environment, the nutrition, and the health properly, we can have a more process-controlled approach to gaining insights that will allow us to both increase the productivity, but also manage the variability in the product. So when we looked at, and Eamon talked a lot about BRD and the impact of BRD and his graph on dairy bred beef and time to finish, but also when we looked at dairy, the impact of early life pneumonia and issues in early life are much more meaningful because it not only affects the time for that animal to reach maturity and get in calf. They normally won't get in calf as quickly. They have reduced first lactations and second lactation, and normally they would even end up living less. So with a potential economic impact of really up to £1,000 on an animal if they had a severe case of BRD. So looking a little bit about the UK numbers and the goals of the project. So currently, in terms of number of replacement heifers need to be reared, on average in the UK, there's an extra 15% of animals that get reared for the replacement. So if you had a herd of 100 animals and you wanted to have another 100 animals, you'd be rearing 115, and then at some point through the line, either through mortalities, morbidity, poor performance, or just barren animals, then only 100 would make it to your herd. So we're trying to reduce that by 66%. So, and at the same time, making sure that all of the animals that do reach the herd, they're of better quality and better milk producers. And this project is kind of just getting started. So really our estimations here are, if we manage to achieve our targets, that would mean that per 100 animals that could impact savings on farm by up to £24,000 every year, or sorry, over the life of that animal. And not only that, but having to both rear less animals and making sure that those animals go into the milking herd and produce more, that represents a carbon footprint reduction of 21% overall for the farm, and also antibiotic reduction of 66%, which is a major win for everyone. So in this process, what we ended up doing was kind of subdividing everything that we could do for the animal throughout the rearing period, and then looking at what were all the major indicators of both health and management that affected the animal throughout that period of time before it entered the milking herd, and for us to use both the data from our sensors and integrating other data to provide key insights across multiple periods. So part of the issue that we faced at the beginning of the project was that there's a lot of data that potentially affects the performance of the animal. And some of it is on other systems, some of it is just on the wall, a lot of it is on paper, and most of it is just on people's heads. So we're back to just, okay, what can we get easily to automatically gather it, and what can we create just feedback mechanisms so that when we create an alert, we start building up the database that complements the picture of what the system is able to understand. And the targets for both projects are effectively the same, but with a slightly different focus, but still improving profitability and growth rates, reducing antibiotic usage, and then making sure that we have enough data for an animal so that we can both improve our metrics and understanding of how the animal is performing, so that when we go and have an issue, we can take a decision based on, okay, based on these numbers, I know that it does need medicating or it doesn't need medicating. So this was just like a quick example. So we effectively further broke down all the different periods of the animal's life with like different issues that they would happen, and kind of did an initial, well, what jobs needs to happen, what are the main pains and gains across for the farm. And then through those interviews, we ended up mapping what the features in the system we needed to build. And one of the things that came up was, okay, not only providing, and through this project, we're creating a mechanism to try and quantify the economic impact of the benefits that we've realized. So when we raise the alerts, or based on the performance of the animal, then creating a monthly report to assess the impact of inaction, or the impact of the actions that the farm had taken at an economic level. Because in general, as humans, we're very bad at assessing that 2 years later, the performance of that animal is due to something that happened when it was a calf, or what happened during its period. So as we collect all the data, we can link and better understand the economic value of all the different things that happen through the animal's life. And then in this project, we're working with 3 farms from the SRUC, from the Agri-EPI network. So, and then the key thing that we wanted to do was to make sure that of the 3 farms that we're working with, they all had different setups and arrangements, so that we had as much variability and make sure that it worked across different farming operations. So Parkin was one of them, and effectively for them, they have around 200 high-yielding cows, and they have individual pens and then move across into then group pens, and then they keep moving across the farm. And then we're also working with Mackie's of Scotland, and their feeding system is slightly different. So for Parken, they bucket feed all the animals, whereas for Mackie's, they start with automatic feeding machines. So they have ad lib feeding for, I believe, the first, it'll be roughly the first 60 days until weaning, and then they go into construct feeding. And Godminster, their organic farm that has partial grazing, which created for us new challenges in terms of the distances at which the system needed to work, as well as making sure that we could rapidly move it between fields as the cows grow and move from outdoor sheds, indoor sheds, and then grazing across multiple fields. And that was one of the interesting challenges that arose after we had the project, and we had to create like a very easy solution to have a solar panel gateway that we could just move across and either attach to a fence or a feeding station or a water trough to be able to collect all the data from those animals and then still transmit it across. This was just like a quick example of some of the paths that were here showcasing. I think this one's a video you can see. So the new tags, as you see, you just use a standard applicator, and then you can punch them through the ear, and then they'll monitor both activity, behavior, and the temperature of the animal. Effectively, what we work in is we have a 2-pronged approach. So we have analysis of the data, and then we send WhatsApp messages like what I showed in the previous presentation to have a more interactive mechanism. So where we just discuss with the farm what the issues are found or any analysis that we've run, but also we're providing them with a dashboard with like, okay, what's the environment around where the animals are, with their temperature, humidity, have alerts in terms of like heat stress, or for calves, we also work on pole stress, and an indication of what are the top animals in terms of alerts that have happened recently, and number of alerts, and a sense of priority in terms of like whether they're on the red, orange, or green. Just a very simple traffic light system. Yeah, so this one's kind of a relatively quick presentation. We're kind of just getting started. We're at the stage that we've set up all the farms. We started putting ear tags on the animals, and we've done about 120 animals. We'll be scaling up to around 350. And in the next year, roughly, we'll be developing all the support for heifer rearing.
Thank you very, very much, Jose. So if all the presenters could bring their videos back on, and we will start taking some questions. I can see some interactions being going on in the chat, so it's great that we've already started to respond there. Okay, so my first question that has come in is, how is each project engaging with commercial farms? So obviously we've heard a little bit, Jose, about those farms, but across the other projects.
Do you want me to jump in first?
Yeah.
And from the Optivis perspective, the biggest thing for us is to make sure the systems we develop are applicable to commercial farms. So we are working directly with a range of commercial farms here in the UK. So essentially installing our systems and testing them out on commercial farms. And the feedback from farmers is the most valuable to us in terms of future proofing and making sure the system is robust and implementable for commercial farms, but also in terms of the development that we're trying to achieve. What we actually need access to is a range of beef animals throughout the supply chain. So throughout the commercial kill in the UK. So the biggest benefit to us in the project is directly engaging with those big commercial finishers that have that huge variety or that huge variation in the kills. So for us, that's how we're directly engaging with commercial farms. I don't know, Andrew or Diego, whether you want to pick up anything.
I think we've got a good range of commercial farms, plenty to prove the concept, and actually the core piece of technology, the Ritchie piece of equipment that these farms will install, early indications seem to me it'd be quite a reasonable price point, which could easily be justified by large finishing units. So, if we have a good communications, and obviously the Sell My Livestock platform will be part of that, and good feedback, then I see this as a very popular, affordable, and practical piece of equipment that could be rolled out on a lot of commercial farms. I don't see the barriers to entry are high at all.
Yeah, for us in Wellcare, we're working with, I think similarly, we try to get a good range of variability. So we're in across 15 different commercial farms of different sizes, ranging from, I think the largest one, it's a dairy beef finisher that has 3,000 animals, and the smallest one, they're rearing 150 animals. So that gives you like a big spectrum. And then across the country, there's some in England, some in Scotland, and then there's a few finishers in Northern Ireland. And some of them are independent, and a couple of them are just associated with like larger producers. So it gives a lot of variability. The other thing that Caroline and the group at SRUC have done really well is that we try to introduce a lot of variability in terms of the kind of animals that we've looked at. So even though we've had dairy bred beef and we've seen a lot of just Friesians, but there's been a good number of Angus calf, and there's even been some Longhorns that came through. So that means that as we're working through, it gives us a good idea of like, okay, what's normal for a calf and what's the sort of variability between different breeds. And I already mentioned that the 3 farms that we're working with in the Healthy Heifer project.
This is Andrew sort of touched on this a little bit already, but it's around what will be the biggest driver of uptake of these technologies on farm. Caroline?
I can jump in first. So there's a few things that spring to mind when we talk about drivers of uptake. The first thing is obviously cost. There has to be a very clear case for return on that investment for that particular product. The other thing is not necessarily about the technology, but about the data. So when we develop a solution for commercial farmers, it's how we present the information to farmers is going to be key to uptake, because if it's complicated or inaccessible, then that is really going to be a massive barrier to the benefits that you can deliver with that technology, and that filters through the farming community quite well. So good data platforms, good, simple, realistic information, a cost point that's clear, that there's a clear return on that investment, but also it has to be robust for the different types of farming systems that are out there. So, you know, we mentioned, you know, you can develop something that's very specific to Crichton, but, you know, the real key is making sure that that's applicable across the type of farming systems that we have across the UK. So that would be the key ones, certainly for me.
Just to add to that, you know, some of the early indications we've got are that if you imagine at the moment, if you want to weigh animals frequently, it involves physically disrupting them. So going into the pen, moving them through a race system and weighing them individually. And that's not very stressful, but does cause a small amount of stress. And that interrupts their growth patterns. So our initial indications are that if you can weigh them unobtrusively every day without disturbing their regular routine, in weight gain, daily weight gain alone, it pays for the kit on a reasonable sized farm. So that's something which is entirely within the farmer's control and is demonstrable. So that doesn't require any other changes further down the supply chain. Now, I think there will be changes down the supply chain. I think you know, there's all sorts of optimizations that occur, but the things entirely within the purchaser's control can pay for the kit. That's quite a compelling proposition.
Thank you, Jose.
Yeah, totally agree. It's all about, I mean, I think like in many things, is all about value for money, right? So if you have a compelling case of like, I have this proposition for you and we have demonstrable results that you can see at farm, then that's the main thing. Because ultimately, from all the conversations I've had with the different farms, they're on board. They all want to reduce their antibiotic use. They all want to improve the profitability, and they're all keen to embrace new technology so long as they're proven and they have a demonstrable value. So I think that's what doing these projects through Innovate UK kind of, and like from your previous question, having farmers directly involved with the project, it helps us to de-risk the development while at the same time making sure that it works, and it's worked on a real commercial farm. And like Caroline said, it's like, no, we didn't just develop this to work in this absolute fancy research facility and it only works there, but it has worked on a farm just like yours.
Thank you. So also we've got a question coming in terms of delivering the big data on these programs, what issues are being faced in the rural and remote areas?
I can jump in.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Like power is in one side, connectivity is on another remote site, and the animals are on a different site. So normally when we started looking to farms, we did a survey and we mapped them all out, and literally it was like, okay, your animals are over there, power's over there, and your internet connection's by the house. So finding ways of deploying kit, and that's partially what we ended up developing our own like outdoor solar gateway, of combining all of these things and making it economical for the farm. I think is going to be key for the future, especially making sure that I mean, the way we started from the beginning developing the system was with like we've developed our APIs internally in a way that we can easily share them. So I'm sure it was similar, especially for the Optivis project with so many partners. But if we have a way of both like connecting something to the farm and then devices interoperating so that they can both share and you don't have to buy 15 different internet connections for 15 different devices, I think that's going to be key moving forward so that it drives part of the adoption. And that's what we've found is to be one of the biggest challenges, just getting stuff connected with a reliable internet connection in the middle of rural UK.
Yeah, I agree with Jose on that. And actually from a research point of view, obviously we're at the R&D end of a lot of these projects. Certainly with the OPTI-BEEF project, the level of data that we're trying to capture on farm is much more than you would need as the commercial product. You know, so we're capturing 3D image data, and that inherently is huge data files. And for us, that does represent a significant challenge.
We're just going to have a few more moments for some questions. So one is around, could this technology be applied outside of the UK as well?
I'll just jump in there. I mean, the core output of our system will be a Europe grid gasification, and that is the mandatory system throughout the EU still. But of course, we want to go beyond that and adopt new measures in the UK. So in theory, it has, you know, it would require some, Caroline, help me out with the word, but you know, you need to be matched to whatever system is used for payment in that jurisdiction. But as long as you undergo that bit of work, it's not collaboration, help me, calibration, then yes, in theory, absolutely.
Okay, brilliant. And then a final question. So how has the pandemic affected the running of these projects?
Who wants to go first?
I can say something there. Yeah, it's definitely affected. For example, access to abattoirs has been a problem. So we've got we have a bit of a delay with the 3 years project. We estimate about 6 months delay, more or less. Is that correct, Caroline?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it has affected data collection and progress in the project.
I think certainly within, I mean, I'll maybe put my OPTI-BEEF hat on here, is that it has affected how we had initially planned to deliver the project. So what we've done is, you know, we've moved certain aspects that we can deliver now forward. There's certain aspects of the project that are miles ahead of schedule, and there's certain aspects that are slightly delayed. So yeah, you know, I think it's hard to say that, I mean, we couldn't say that it didn't have an impact. It most certainly has had an impact, access to facilities, new ways of working, etc. But I think we've acclimatized to that incredibly well within both projects. You know, there's lots of good platforms out there that's allowed us to really engage and drive the projects forward.
Great, great. So we're getting, oh, Jose, have you got something to add there? Sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that interestingly for us, it was similar period of time. So we probably had about a 6-month delay between getting used to working remotely and moving everyone, moving all the electronics facility to someone's house so that they could carry on working. And then just delays on shipment and manufacturing, because still factories were rightfully building, like even our plastic manufacturer, they were building COVID tests and lateral flow tests and different things, and all our stuff got pushed back. But the Healthy Heifer actually got started in the middle of the pandemic and hasn't been that much affected. So I think it was mostly the how to get set up, and then after you've done it, then you know how to run stuff in the current world.
Great. I'm going to just take one more question, sorry, and it is across to Eamon and Diego, but it is around how will these new technologies affect the day-to-day running from a veterinary perspective, essentially?
Yeah, well, sorry. Yeah, well, the hope would be obviously, you know, if these guys are working on an app on their mobile phone, the guy has his routine. He's going into the calf shed, he's checking the milk machine, looking around the calves. He looks at his phone and he's picking up those subclinical disease. He's picking up those warnings, and then he can treat the animals accordingly. So I've been involved with 2 farms at the minute that are using this, and they have found it very, very useful.
Diego, any final comments or?
Not me. Sorry.
Great. All right then. So we're going to wrap up the session today. Thank you very, very much for all of your presentations and all of the information on the various projects. This will be available on YouTube, and it will be also shared again across social media. So thank you very much for everyone participating, and we hope you have a great day. There's 2 more days left of Innovation Week if you'd like to join us. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.